later on. All right. So good morning. We are today going to discuss chapter 6 in the Tanya. As we spoke a moment ago, some are well versed or have been engaged in one-on-one combat, or combat is a strong word, but one-on-one sports, individual sports. And so typically, when we engage in a sport, if it was up to us, we will choose an opponent who is not as good as us. This way we have a better chance of winning against the opponent. However, in the purest sense, we would prefer to have someone who is equal to us or even better than us, because this will force us to be even better than we are currently. Because an individual has this drive not only to be victorious, but also to be better. We always want to be better. And we're never going to be our best if we fight or we battle against someone that is weaker than us. So sometimes we want to look to someone that is like us or better than us. But obviously that comes from a degree of maturity, when we're mature enough to understand that ultimately in life, the purpose is to consistently achieve greater degrees of success and greater degrees of ability to be our ultimate best self. But when one watches MMA or a boxing match, one wants to learn about these two characters that are in this cage that are fighting against each other. And so, especially with a sport like MMA, not that I'm promoting such a violent sport at all, but just use it as an analogy. So when one understands that sport, we know that each contestant has certain strengths and certain weaknesses. So are they better at on the ground? Are they better with their feet? Are they better with their arms? Are they better, tackling the person down, or better with their punching? Are they quicker? So all these different components we have to kind of, take into account. And the point of this analogy is that everything in life, and this is really the key to our discussion today, everything in life that God created, everything in this world has a opposite to it. So if God created something holy, God also created something equally as unholy. If God created something good, something that we want to engage in, something that seems to be a positive pleasure, God also created something equally as unholy, equally as enjoyable, but to the opposite end of the spectrum. Why would God create a world with two opposites? It is quite obvious. If you went into a boxing ring or a MMA cage and there's no opponent, then you are who you are. Big deal. You accomplished nothing. You didn't become better. You didn't become worse. You just fought against yourself, which whatever that means. But if you have an opponent, now you can gauge your success, your temperament, your strength. The world we live in, we want to see how strong we are in terms of our relationship with God. We want to see, am I truly dedicated to the wills, the wants, or the expectations that God has of me? If I don't face any opponent, then I would not know if I'm being successful or not. So therefore, Hashem made to every holy desire, he also created an unholy desire. To everything that God wants me to do and encourages me to do, he put exactly that same thing in front of me. That is the opposite of that. And the question is, what will I engage in? Or what will I choose? And it has to be an equal opposite, because if I am to battle against somebody else, I'm to battle someone that is weaker, that doesn't show that I'm strong. And so spiritually, if I have a challenge in front of me, if the challenge is a weaker challenge and I overcome it, okay, big deal. It doesn't really show how strong I really am. But if something is equal to the choice that I want to make for the good thing and equal to the choice that I want to make that is not good, and then I have to choose one from the other and I choose the good thing, that shows that I'm really strong and I know my purpose and my mission and what I want to accomplish. And so when God created our universe that we live in, the spiritual components of the universe, he also created the opposite of the spiritual components, the unholy. So he created the holy aspects of the universe and the unholy. We human beings are a reflection of these 10 spiritual faculties, these 10 spiritual energies. As you mentioned previously, we have the emotional attributes and the intellectual attributes. We have the ideas and we have the feelings. These 10 attributes. God also created 10 unholy attributes, intellectual and emotional. So today we're going to talk about these two parts, these two sides. Now, last week we spoke about, or in chapter 4 and 5, the benefits of the garments of the soul, the holy garments that clothe us. We spoke about the fact that when we study the Torah, we are enclosed in God's words and God surrounds us. So we are in it and we are around it. We are being surrounded by it and it also fills us. The same thing is also with the unholy, or the opposite, 10 faculties, 10 powers of the soul. For example, speech. Okay? The words that we use, the same exact words that we use, not just general words, but the exact same words that we use can be used for something holy, something purposeful, meaningful, uplifting. And those exact same words can be used to put somebody down, hurtful, derogatory, insightful, and so on. We can take a simple object like this book, this piece of paper, okay? All it is a piece of paper. That's it. If I ask you, is this piece of paper holy? You'd say, it's not holy, right? May not be holy, but it's not holy either. It's just neutral. It's just a piece of paper. But when we take this piece of paper and we write a positive message or a thank you message or a love message to somebody we care about, now that piece of paper became a cherished piece of paper. You have taken it from just a simple, possibly insignificant piece of paper that was about to be thrown out to something that now you will keep it. It is cherished. But we can take this even deeper. And that is, God commands us that when we have a home and we have a doorpost in our home, we should put a mezuzah on that doorpost. A mezuzah is this spiritual protection that goes on our door. What is the mezuzah made up of? It comes from a piece of parchment. Now, a piece of parchment is simply a piece of skin from an animal. It's a skin of an animal that has been stretched, and now it became a useful thing that we can now write something on it. It's a piece of parchment. But until we actually write the words of the Torah, the words of the Shema on this piece of parchment, it is simply a insignificant piece of material. So we took this piece of material, and by us simply writing words of the Torah, we have transformed it to something holy. Now, this physical piece of paper or piece of parchment has now become not only a purposeful, meaningful piece of parchment, but now it became a holy piece of parchment. In other words, we took a physical object and by us utilizing it for something holy, we've completely transformed its purpose and its reality. And now it has a new identification. It is a holy piece of parchment. We now cannot throw it in the garbage. We cannot destroy it, misuse it, but it has to be taken care of with a certain degree of respect and honor and treat it as something holy. In other words, we can take something that is neutral and infuse it with something holy. Okay? Why? Because God made a world, this world that we live in such a manner that it contains within it elements that are holy, elements that are unholy, and elements that are neutral. That which is holy is holy. That which is unholy, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. And that which is neutral is up to us to either utilize it for a good purpose, for a godly purpose, or as we are talking now, for a spiritual holy purpose, or we can utilize it for unholy purposes. Okay. I want to take another example before we delve into this, and that is something as basic as the staple of food. Right? We need to eat. Now, the food that we eat is a neutral food. It has no spiritual or holy aspects to it. It's just food. But we can actually take this food and not only elevate it, but we can actually make this food into a vehicle or to something that is absolutely, positively holy. Or we can take this food and use it absolutely, positively for something corrupt, something horrific. Okay? So let's say we have a vegetable, okay? A vegetable that grows in the ground. We cut the vegetable and let's say it's a potato, okay? We can take that potato and use it as a weapon, throw it into someone's head and hurt somebody, okay? It's taking a neutral thing, but you've used it for a bad purpose, right? You can take that same potato and you can eat that potato and you've done nothing with that potato. The potato hasn't become holy, hasn't become unholy. It's just still a potato. The potato is not any longer on your dish. Now it's in your stomach. But you can also take that potato and make a blessing on the potato and now eating that potato. And now the potato has been elevated to a little bit of a holy purpose because you've made a blessing on it. You've recognized that this potato comes from God. Okay? Simple little thing. But we can take it even further. You can take that energy that you now got from that potato and you can utilize it, that energy, to help somebody out, to share something, to use the energy to be a positive influence on somebody else. Okay. Now, not only have you made the blessing on the potato, which is a good thing, but you've also used the energy, the vitamins, the nutrients that the potato gives you to utilize it for something good. Okay. You further elevated that potato. But let's say you didn't do any of those things, but you simply ate the potato on the holy Shabbat day to honor the Shabbos. So everything about the potato, the fact that it's on your dish, and if you made a blessing and you use the energy, even if you didn't use the energy, but if you simply ate that potato in honor of the Sabbath, the holy Sabbath day, you've now elevated that potato to a level that it on its own cannot be elevated, but you've also fulfilled the purpose of why that potato was created in the first place. And it may seem trivial, but if you think about it, it is has profound impact that we can make simply by engaging in meaningful, purposeful way of living. We can take things that we use in our daily life and utilize it for a proper purpose, and we are completely transforming the reason or the purpose, or elevating or fulfilling the true purpose of why it was made, why it was created. Okay, we can do that with art. We can do that with anything else that is neutral in this world. In short, everything that does not include a godly purpose and does not bring a productive increase in one's service to the Creator, it is a sign that it is related or connected to the influences opposite of God. Okay. For this reason, we need to be careful and cognizant that even during normal work, we should infuse it with holiness and be careful that it does not separate us from God. Who has the power to do this? Each and every individual. We have two competing forces inside of us. 10 holy faculties, holy garments, holy powers, and 10 unholy. At the beginning of the day, they're all in the middle, neutral. How will we utilize these faculties, these feelings? And so today, we're going to discuss the profound insight that the Alter Rebbe, the author of the Tanya, gives us to help us understand how these components function within us and how we could utilize them and how we could maximize our gifts that God gives us. But in order for us to understand how to do this, we have to know what we're made up of. And this is why, after I've been introduced up until chapter 6, we're up to now, the fact that we have two souls, a godly soul and a natural soul or an animal soul. Introduced that we have garments of the soul, that we have ideas, we have feelings, we have expressions, we have all these different components. And now in chapter 6, 7, and 8, he's introducing that we also have the unholy components to it. And then he's going to regroup after that and say, okay, now that we know what we're dealing with, we have to know who we are, who our opponent is, and how we should watch tape in order to know how we can win and the battle and overcome our opponents. Make sense? Okay. So let's now jump into chapter number 6 of the Tanya. And we're going to look inside. I'm going to read through this quickly and then we will talk about it. We're going to share the screen. Second. Okay. All right, we got it. V'hinei, the Almighty has created one thing opposite the other. Just as the divine soul consists of 10 holy faculties, which correspond to the 10 supernal sephiros, the faculties, and is clothed in 3 holy garments, the thought, speech, and action of Torah and mitzvahs, so to the soul of the Sitra Achra is derived. I'm going to explain this 1 second from the Klippas Noga, which is clothed in man's blood, as explained in chapter 1. The animal soul is clothed in the blood and thereby animates the body of the soul. we have the godly soul, the 10 holy faculties, and we also have the soul powers of the Sitra Achra, the other side, the unholy. These are derived from Klipas Noga. Klipas Noga is the natural or the neutral powers. They're not unholy, they're neutral. Now, why do I say this? Because we have certain things in this world that we human beings do not have the power to elevate. Okay? They're completely forbidden. There are certain things in this world that are completely permitted. There are certain things in this world that are neutral. We can either use it, they're permitted, but we can use it for permitted purposes, or God forbid, use it for forbidden things. Okay? We can take something, use it for self-defense. We can take something and use it to harm somebody. The same thing. These are neutral things. There are some things in this world that we cannot elevate. We don't have the power to transform that or to infuse it with holiness. This is something that God created in the world. If you want an example of something like that, it'll be a non-kosher food is an example. Okay, non-kosher food is forbidden to us, and it's connected to unholiness. The Hebrew word for forbidden is called asur. The Hebrew word for the word permitted is mutar. Asur means it is tied, meaning to say it is bound to unholiness, and we cannot unbound it, we can't untie it, unchain it. And mutar means it's permitted, it is unchained, untied, and we can elevate it. Okay. Most items in this world are of neutral disposition. We can either use it for holiness or not. So this is what it means, klipas noga. Klipas noga means the neutral klipa, the neutral shell. Now, let's take for example, okay? On our fruits or vegetables, we have peels or shells. You have some shells that are completely inedible, unuseful, and have zero purpose once you crack open that shell and you take out what was inside that shell. You have some that can be edible. In theory, you can eat it. It may not taste great, but you can eat it. You can use it. Okay? And so this is what it means. Klippa means shell. You have a shell that is neutral, not bad, not good. You have shell that is completely bad. The other side, which also has potentially positive or good aspects to it, it is only up to us to elevate it, consists of the 10 crowns of impurity, i.e., the faculties of Klippa called crowns in Kabbalistic terminology. These 10 faculties are the 7 evil midos, 7 emotional traits, which stem from 4 evil elements mentioned above. Okay, the ideas and the feelings. You have evil ideas and evil feelings. You have good ideas and good feelings. And the intellect, which gives birth to these 7 midos, which is subdivided into 3: wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, the source of midos. So let's try to break this down so we can understand it on a more concrete level. Okay. If you have a business associate and you decide that you want to take advantage of the business associate, okay? You want to steal from them or gain an upper hand in a unscrupulous manner, okay? You go and you devise a plan, and then you implement the plan, okay? What part of you was engaged in this plan? What part of you is this unholy or evil behavior? Is it coming from your emotions, your feelings, or is it coming from your ideas, your intellect? Okay. Where did this plan start from? It's important to know it, because if we understand it, we'll have a better way or better tools to be able to overcome it the next time we're faced with this challenge. So where does this stem from? Does it stem from the mind, the intellect, or from the emotions? All evil starts from the emotions. All holiness starts from the intellect. Okay. Now one can argue, say, wait a second, it's not true. Because if I'm devising a plan to take advantage of my business associate, that's pure intellect. I'm making the plan in my mind. I'm figuring out how to do it, right? So it's a mind thing. It's not a hard thing. And when one contemplates the order, one will actually see that first I had that gut feeling that I didn't like that person. Like is love, which is an emotion. And then it traveled up to my brain, and I used my intellect to devise a plan to how to take advantage of that person. But it started from the feelings. And then it convinced my brain to convince me that this is the right thing to do. And now I justified what I did. Of course, if somebody asks you, you take advantage, you would never say I did. Oh, it purely justified. I did this, that, and the other, right? It's a perfect calculation that makes perfect sense, business sense even. And I can justify that I did the right thing, why I maybe cheated on my taxes or took advantage of something else, right? But that comes from an emotional place. But then we have the flip side. So that is the unholy expression of our emotions and our intellect. We have the flip side, that we see somebody in need and we want to help them out. Now we want to help them out. One can say that's an emotional thing, right? I feel bad for that person. Feeling is in the gut, in the heart, in the emotions. But then when one thinks about it, why do you feel bad for that person? Who trained you or taught you that you should feel bad to a person that is less fortunate than you? Where does that come from? Does everybody have that feeling? No, maybe it's because of your upbringing. Okay, so you had a upbringing that taught you is a brain thing, how to appreciate or value another person. And therefore, when you see someone in need, you automatically respond emotionally. So where does that start? That started in the intellect, and it traveled down to the emotions. So Alter Rebbe teaches us, and this, by the way, if someone asks you, what is the basic fundamental principle of Hasidic philosophy? It is 3 words. Moach shalit al halev, or 4 words. The brain, the intellect, controls the emotions. If one can live their life that their mind can dictate to their hearts, I can assure you, without a shadow of a doubt, you will live a much more meaningful, uplifting, and better life. But it's not easy, because our emotional many times takes over our intellectual, and it convinces us. But if we can be clear exactly what's leading to what is the first step, and we can be sure that our mind controls our heart, we'll be in a much better position. So Alter Rebbe tells us like this, that we have 10 holy faculties and the opposite, 10 unholy ones, powers. Exactly the same ideas that we have that drive us to do something holy, those same ideas drive us to convince us to do something unholy. Exactly those same feelings we have that tells us to do something holy, something good, something productive, tells us to do something damaging, unproductive, unholy. Okay? The same materials that we use for something bad to write a derogatory statement. The same, let's say, Twitter post that I use or tweet that I write something negative, something bad that can be hurtful. I can also write the exact same words as something positive, something uplifting, something empowering. Okay. The same 140 characters can be bad or can be good. It's up to me. So a child, let's understand this on a level that the Alter Rebbe explains. Back on the screen here. A child desires and loves petty things of little value, for his intellect is too immature and deficient to appreciate more valuable things. Similarly, with regard to the midah of gevurah, of strength, he is angered and vexed by trivial things. And likewise, with regard to boastfulness, which expresses the midah of tiferes and other middos. Okay. Now, these 10 unclean categories, when a person thinks thoughts originating from them, when he thinks of ways of obtaining something he desires, or speaks words originating from them, or does an act which serves or expresses them, then the thought in his brain, the words in his mouth, and the power of action in his hands and other organs are called impure garments for these 10 unclean categories. What happens with these 10 unclean categories? They clothe themselves in these garments during the act, speech, or thought. Okay. So these garments of the animal soul comprise all the deeds that are done under the sun. And so too also with our speech. So what is the Alter Rebbe telling us over here? He's saying very simple. That everybody will agree that a child's emotional capacity or a child's intellectual capacity is not as developed as an adult's. Right? This is why if an adult gets angry because somebody took their pencil, the way a kid gets angry that someone took their pencil, you know that that adult needs serious therapy or it needs is something majorly wrong with that adult. Okay. A child that is upset that someone took their pencil, okay. We try to explain to them that's not so bad, right? Because the child's emotions have not been developed yet to the extent that they could understand or appreciate someone else coming into their space or borrowing something from them, playing with their toys or whatever. But an adult has. So we see, just from this example, that there's a difference. We can't say that emotions are equal all across the board. The same emotions is different from a child to an adult. But an adult knows how to deal with that emotion, and a child doesn't yet know how to deal with that emotion. So if this is the case with an adult and child, we can appreciate how much more complex emotions are or intellect is. And this, it can be holy, it can be unholy. In other words, there's no limit to our emotional complexities or our intellectual complexities. Just like it's different a child and adult, it's different from one adult to another adult, it's different 1 hour to the other hour, and it's different also from purity to impurity, holiness to unholiness, to openness to closedness. Taking something that seems to be defined, but yet we could redefine it. Imagine we can take, as we said, this piece of paper that one can say it is measured a certain size, it weighs a certain thing, or we can redefine it by utilizing it for something completely different. We can make a plane out of it. You can make a boat out of it, whatever. You can take something and completely transform its purpose, its role. You can make a hat out of it. When I go put on tefillin with people sometimes in their office and they don't have a yarmulke, I can take a piece of paper, make it into a yarmulke. Boom. Now it has a holy purpose. Right? Something as simple as any created thing God gives us the power to transform it, to elevate it, or to the opposite. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is addressing. We have in us, we have these unbelievable emotions. We have incredible ideas, incredible mental faculties. How are we going to use it? The same powers we have to do good also equally challenge us on the other side. How does this work? And now the Alter Rebbe addressed a fundamental question, and that is like this. Wait a second. I understand that my godly faculties, my spiritual energies, emotions, intellect, garments, wants, clothing that I wear, my thought, my speech and action, I could understand when I utilize it for godly purposes. Why? Because it comes from God. It makes sense. It's perfectly reflecting the creator of this universe. But how could something that was created or put onto this world by the creator be used to harm somebody, to hurt somebody, to destroy someone? If it's coming from God, how could it also be opposite of God? If it's coming from the source of goodness, of holiness, how could it also be used for unholiness? Make sense? So take this world that we live in. If this world is translucent, is a reflection of God, it can't also be not visible, hiding, opaque. Either it's visible, translucent, or not. Either it can be seen, it's an open book, or it's a closed book. Can't be both. So how can we say that there's holiness and there's the opposite of holiness? How does that work out? Why God made it, we understand. We already addressed it, to make us choose between the two opposites. I get it. But how is it even possible to exist if it's completely unholy? And the answer, Alter Rebbe says over here, is that when Hashem created the world, it comes about through a series of steps. Or, to be more precise, it comes through a series of screens. When the sun shines, if we would not put on our sunglasses in the morning or close our blinds, it would be very hard for us to open up our eyes. It's too bright. So we create these different screens to allow us to appreciate the light, but not in its full intensity. And so the way that God created the world is through a series of what is known as tzimtzumim. Tzimtzumim means contractions, that the light that permeates the world contracts one level after the next. And it goes to a series of not just refinements, but also it gets less intense, okay? It's not so potent anymore. It's not so concentrated anymore. It's diluted with each level that it comes through until it finally comes into our world. In our world, it's diluted so much, we don't even realize that it's actually orange juice or whatever, the concentrated drink that we had. It tastes like nothing, right? So we don't appreciate the holiness anymore. We don't appreciate the light of the sun because it came through so many contractions, we almost don't even feel the benefits that we're getting from it. And so not only we don't feel we're getting the benefits, we actually think that it's an opponent to God. It's the opposite of God. And we may even term it evil or bad. But according to Judaism, even that is a creation from God. It cannot be independent from God. It's a creation from God. But because it came through so many delusions, so many levels of contractions of being watered down, that sometimes we don't either see the holy spark in it. And this is what the Alter Rebbe is saying. This is when we recognize it, as he's going to say in later chapters, we then have the power to unearth the holiness that is even in that which seems to be opposite of holiness, because even that was created by God. But for right now, where we're holy now, we're simply saying that we only see the unholiness. Why? Because it comes through this series of some of contractions. Right? What? Yeah, the page. We're gonna put it on the screen here so we can see it inside.
Mm-hmm.
Tell Jennifer what pages.
104, 105, I think.
Okay.
What word you got?
1 second. Okay, here we go. To return to the Alter Rebbe's words, the self-styled separate being does not receive its vitality from pneumis, from the inner aspects of holiness, from its very essence and core, but from the acharayim, the hind part, so to speak. The limited form of life force reaches the klippos by descending degree by degree through myriads of levels in the chain-like descent of the worlds in the manner of cause and effect. And the vitality descends also through many tzimtzumim, many contractions, and this process diminishes the vitality to the point where it is incomparably lower than in its original state. Until it diminishes so greatly diminished does the light and life force become diminution after the diminution until it is able to become contracted and clothed in a manner of exile. So the world that we live in then, we no longer appreciate or see the holiness. Why? Because it has so many different degrees of contraction. Now we said an interesting word over here, Alter Rebbe uses. That how does this come about? That comes about through a chain-like descent, right? We can spend a lot of time talking about this word, the chain-like descent, how it actually comes into being. But also, we can talk about another word that the Alter Rebbe used that I think will give us some insight into how we deal with this world, and that is that it comes from the hind part. So when you give charity to somebody, okay, or when you feed your pet, okay, how do you feed your pet? Do you go to the pet store and spend a lot of money buying the best foods for your pet, because that's what they advertise on TV, that this is the best for your pet? Or do you eat your dinner and whatever's leftovers, do you give it to your pet? Right? When you give charity to a poor person collecting money, do you give it to them with a smile, or do you kind of just throw it over your shoulder? Here, take it. Right? When you give a gift to somebody, do you give the gift because you're happy, excited to give it to them, or do you give it begrudgingly? In both cases, the person got it. Your pet was fed, the poor man received the charity, and your friend got the gift. But would you agree that there's a difference in how it was given? Of course. One is given from face to face, happily, and one is given kind of just leftovers, whatever, take it here, take it, this is what I got. When it comes to how Hashem created the world, God created the world also in a direct manner and within a leftover manner, indirect manner, in a way of face to face, or in a way of throwing it over his back, so to speak. Holiness is so intense, so concentrated with goodness. It's because God intentionally focused his energies and created it. But God also saw the need to create other components in the world, and therefore he created it. But with what? with the leftovers, so to speak. It's also from God, but it's not as potent as direct from God. It is over his shoulder, so to speak. Here, take it. We need to have other elements in the world. We'll give it to you. Right? Yet, even that is created from God. Like we said, how is a chain made? Each link is interconnected with the one above it. So if you go all the way back, you'll see that the lower link is in some parts higher than the link above it, right? When you have a chain, so that this lower one is higher than this part of the higher one, and you keep on going. So they're interconnected. They're not just glued together, but they're interconnected, meaning to say that there's a direct line from the top link all the way to the bottom link. When Hashem created the world, even klippas, even that which is unholy or neutral, is directly connected with God above in this chain-like connection. It is only that it's so distant that we may not appreciate or see the intensity of the God's energy. And this is what we're made up of. On one hand, full of intensity of holiness, of greatness. On the other hand, full of this opposite of also coming from God, but the challenge because it opposes all my good parts, all my holy parts, all my wants, my spiritual wants. And it tries to say, no, look, I'm also coming from God. I'm also holy. I'm also good. But we have to be able to decipher what is a true, healthy emotional feeling or unhealthy emotional feeling. What is a healthy, godly, intellectual idea? What is an ungodly idea? And when we work on this, when we think about it, we then will be able to deal with it as we will talk about in the next chapters of the Tanya. Thank you very much. Have a great day. Any questions?
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead.
So would you say also, given this chain where everything's connected, that it helps that holy part grow? And maybe that's the ultimate purpose, is that along with it just being left over from God, because that unholy you're mentioning in the chain is partially over the holy. Is it because that unholy element is what pushes you to grow holier? So they need both of each other. It's symbiotic in a way. You know what I'm saying?
Excellent question. So the short answer is absolutely. God didn't create anything by mistake or for no purpose. So everything that God created has a purpose. The question, though, is, or the challenge is, not the question, but the challenge is that sometimes we say, okay, I want to elevate this unholy thing, and we get too caught up in the unholy that we stay unholy because we may not have the power to lift it up. But in theory, yes, if it's created by God, we have the power to elevate and transform it.
Interesting. Thank
That's
you.
when God says, don't touch us. I'm making this, but don't go near it. But most of the world is neutral, that God says, yes, this is for you to engage in holy things. But if you really need to eat, but use it for holiness. Because sometimes we can, just a simple example. Someone was quite heavy, and they came to a doctor, and the doctor says, you really should start eating vegetables. So the guy said, okay, no problem. If that's what I need to do for my health, I'm going to start to eat vegetables. Comes back 3 months later, and he hasn't lost a pound. And so he says, doctor, I've been eating only vegetables. So the doctor said, yeah, elephants also eat only vegetables. So in other words, because God created it, doesn't mean we have to overindulge in it. So we can take it and utilize it for something good. But if you overindulge in the physical world that God created, it's also not a good thing. It may not be bad, but it's not either good.
Makes sense. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much.